Hi, everybody, and welcome to Friday Night Flock Talk. I'm Robin Sullivan of the Leather Elves, and I want to welcome you all. So, for those of you that aren't regulars, hi, everybody that's a regular. For those of you that are not, I have some basic announcements that I do every single week. So if you need to go get a snack, go do that. You can like us, like the Leather Elves on Facebook, and you get notifications. And you can, when we go live, you can check our Facebook page to catch surprise sales and pop up events and things like that. You can also follow the Leather Elves on Instagram. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. So there's a lot of different ways you can be part of Flock Talk. Hi, Diane. Happy Friday. Um, this week we have an interesting guest. It's someone who is an expert in her field. So I want to get started so that we can talk about these really cool different birds. So let me introduce you guys to Chris Touchton. If we've got Chris there. Hi, Chris. How's it going?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
They're
I'm going to
sticking
read
up.
your bio. It catches you off guard. I'll be sitting here and I'm doing stuff, and then I'm like, oh wait, okay.
Well, I'm looking at
So
it, it's just like looks like horns.
it's feathers. We're
Sorry.
gonna go with it's feathers. That's it. Um, so I'm gonna just read Chris's bio really quickly, and then we can get started. So Chris lives in Florida, and she's been breeding lories since 1989. She started her collection with wild caught adults and former pets. And in the beginning, she sold all the babies. And then in turn, she bought and paired up more adults. In 1992, she turned to incubating and hand feeding because most hand feeding most of them because the parents were constantly trashing the eggs and killing the chicks. And anybody who's done breeding or who has been in a breeding situation knows that is something that can and does occur. And it's been getting harder and harder to find lories now. So every year, Chris picks 2 to 4 different types of lories to hold back as future breeders. In approximately 2005, she formulated her own Lori diet as the ones that were being commercially available were declining in quality and were no longer up to quality standards. Currently, Jordan Berber is manufacturing and marketing a Lori diet that's based on her recipe, and that's lorieschoice.com. And Missouri, which is a division of Purina, has also developed a Lori nectar based on her recipe. And so Chris says, at this point, I'm going to keep working with Lori's until I can't carry the food bucket. I think we're all, it's like until I can't get out in that aviary anymore, that's where we're going to be. So welcome.
Nine gallons of nectar a day.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
the heavy
Yeah.
bucket.
So it's that,
If you
that
don't
exercise
use it, you
program that
lose it.
I don't think any of us planned on, in our later years that we were going to be doing this much physical exercise.
Well, that's why I'm in the middle of redoing my whole aviary because I'm trying to make it for when I get older, I'll still be able to do them. So
Good
just definitely
planning.
got to try to
Absolutely
work out
good
the problem.
planning. Okay, so first question. How did you get started with, I mean, they're amazing, but how did you get started with lorries?
Back in approximately 1989, I walked into a pet store and there was a green ape. And I looked at those colors and I was like, oh my, I couldn't believe the colors. And then he stuck his tongue out and it was this brush thing. And I was like, ooh. But the colors and they just intrigued me. And I got him, and then I'm a Noah's Ark type person. Then I got him a buddy, and they didn't get along. And then I had to get buddies for those buddies. And here I am 300 and something later. So it's,
It
I just,
happens.
they fascinate me.
So, all right. So were you, they were pet. The first one was a pet.
No, actually, it was a wild caught bird. So it
Oh,
wanted
okay.
nothing to do with me. And I wasn't going to force
Mhm.
it. I loved watching them together. I loved watching them interact, play, they'd wrestle, and then I put together a pair of blue streaks and a nest box, and they laid eggs, and we hatched those, and and I just kind of was like, wow, this is really cool, and I seem to be okay at it. And there was no literature, and there was no Google, there was nothing back then. So I borrowed a Rosemary Lowe Lorries and Lorikeet book. It was falling apart. I called it the bootleg copy, and I copied every single page because I it was a borrowed book, and I try to base a lot of what I was doing off of that because that was the only book, and it wasn't even in publication back then. So a lot of this has been just trial and error. So I mean, we
Mhm.
started out, there was no diets at all. We started out with monkey biscuit, like Zupreme monkey biscuit, soaked in honey, and that was pretty much the main food for them in the beginning until I had to go through trial and error. So because that was not sustainable.
Were there a lot of them in the pet trade back then?
They used to import pretty much so hundreds to thousands of lorries every year, all the way up to 1992 when the Wild Bird Conservation Act kicked in. They
Mhm.
would have a quota that they were allowed yearly to bring in. And a lot of our rainbows, the different types, are here today because they were lumped in as rainbow, but it was Forestines, Ferruliceps, Weber's, eh, Mitchell's. It was just all different types. That's actually a pair of Mitchell's there. So a lot, and fortunately, breeders that were near the quarantine stations would go out to the quarantine stations, and they knew that that was a Rosenberg and that was a Weber, and that was, I mean, Dick Schroeder. He put together the Rosenbergs, and that's where I first
Mhm.
saw them. And so they were it really worked out that they paired up proper and true instead of green egg because
So
the rainbow family is kind of like the Labrador family, the retriever family, where you got yellow labs, black labs, Chesapeake Bay, golden labs. So you've got a retriever family, rainbow family, and then you got all the different types underneath that
so,
one moniker.
um, so that brings up a question for me. There are are they subspecies or are they
Yeah,
they're different
yeah, they're
species? They're
subspecies.
subspecies.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
approximately
Um,
53 different species in the lories, but there's been dispute that maybe goldies should be with this group and duskies should be with that group. So it's approximate. I work with about 25 different types of lories here, which has unfortunately declined from about 32. So because I try, but the birds got to cooperate. So
you can't force
it's
them to do
hard.
anything. I mean,
No, they have to be
so
happy.
yeah, and so geographically, so we've got, that many species. Geographically, where do we find lories, like, if in the wild?
Okay, you've got Australia, which has your blue mountains, your red collards, your musk, scalies. They have varied, but they're not in the United States. Um, Purple crowns, which are not in the United States. So the only thing in the United States from Australia is pretty much so going to be your blue mountains, your red collards, and your musk and scalies. A lot of those, because Australia doesn't export, there was a lot of
Mhm.
those birds were brought into zoos and then they went throughout the United States from the zoos way back. The Indonesian birds from all the Indonesian islands, Bali, Solomons, all there, those birds were the ones that were imported by hundreds to thousands. That's actually a cardinal lory, and that's from the Solomon Islands. So that's where we were able to get a lot of the different species because the bulk of the species are from the Indonesian islands. Blue crowns, pretty sure they're from Solomon's also.
Chris, I don't know if
Uh,
you saw the comment on the bottom. Sarah said
no,
that
I
it
did
was
not.
Chris Touchton, the best of the best.
Oh,
So, but,
you're
if
killing
maybe
me, Sarah.
if we go through some of these slides, if Nick can just kinda
And
go through
this,
some of the pictures that you
uh,
sent.
yeah, this is actually a hybrid because a lot of the mutation colors, except for the scaly was the original one that mutated into yellows, olives, I think there was a blue at one point. But the way the Australians got the mutation in their red colors, the blue mountains, what they've hybridized them with a lot of things. They've used scalies to splice them in to get that color morph gene, and that's actually
Hmm.
green nape, Lori, that I use scalies with into green apes, and then I would take that chick that looked more like a green ape because the band. It took me several generations to get that band in there,
Mhm.
and then I put them with regular green apes, and then just take those chicks and just keep breeding, putting them together. So that's actually a
So
sharp looking bird.
so if you hybridize like that, um, is they're still capable of reproduction?
They're not, yeah, they're not mules.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're
Okay,
definitely able to.
okay,
Yeah, it's not mules. I don't. I guess
okay,
it's because they're so closely related. They're not like totally different genus. I think the it would be called. But yeah, no,
okay.
they definitely breed.
And they
Lorries are
hybridize in
like
the wild?
sailors. Excuse me.
They
They've
hybridize in
got a
the
little
wild?
one in every port. Those are musts. That's actually an Australian type.
I was in
I haven't
Australia, I was
hybridized. Excuse me.
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
I
haven't hybridized those at all. It was just the green apes. That's the only one I've done is the green apes and the scalies for trying to splice in a color.
s so,
And these guys
you
are
know,
actually
I
pretty musical. When
musical?
yeah, they have almost like a little whistle to them. And I don't mean like wolf whistle, like maybe a lorry, because lorries are actually most of them are can be fairly good mimics.
Mhm.
But these guys have a little bit of a musical note to their when they're mature and they're courting. I
Well,
can't
that's neat.
replicate it, but it's a cute
If you
noise.
could, you'd be rich. Um,
Yeah.
so do they hybridize in the wild?
I don't know because I've never observed them out there.
Right,
I imagine it's possible because I mean the lories they are a companion bird. They love to have a companion. I mean I don't like having lories by themselves.
right,
So I imagine it could happen, but it probably doesn't happen very often.
okay.
Blue streaks, that's
And
one
what
of
are
my
the
favorites. Blue streak lorries,
are
and
the
there's hardly any of these guys in the United States. I'm working with them, trying desperately. Jordan's working with them, trying to think. Bob Scrabble might have. I mean, they're like they're almost gone. A lot of the
wow.
types of lorries are almost gone. Blue
Hmm.
mountains are here. Scalies are here. Even the green napes have gotten dwindled in numbers. Now those are chatterings, and you can see chattering is a nominant, and they actually would have no yellow on their back. And the other one would be a yellow back chattering, but the one up top does have yellow, and the yellow varied from region to region, depending on where they came from. Would say how much, whether
Huh.
it was a dime size worth of yellow or a coffee cup size yellow. The ones, oh, I wish I had gotten them a long time ago. They came in and they had yellow on their backs. It was the size of a coffee cup. Most of them have about a quarter to a silver dollar size.
Huh. So are they none of them
These guys, none of them are what?
are rare in the wild, or are they?
There's a lot of them that are rare in the wild because the native countries are just letting deforestation come in. I mean, Australia is one thing, but the Indonesian islands, they they're gonna feed their families, whether they eat the birds or farm the and chop all the trees down or sell them to Singapore. It
Yeah.
really takes a toll on the birds.
And so what type of habitat do they live in?
There's tropic and like a subtropic. It depends on which island they come from. The lories here, not that this is native, but I've had the temperatures go down as low as 11 degrees. But you can't just set them down in 11 degrees and thinking you're going to be good to go. They got to be acclimated. So what I
Mhm.
do when winters, and it doesn't happen very often. It was one horrible year back in 2010, but they definitely every single year they'll go through low 20s for several days, and that's the nighttime, and then it warms up a bit, and then as long as it's not like 3 months worth of freezes, you'll be okay.
Mhm.
Because down here in Florida, it's sporadic, but it does freeze, and they are able to. If I see birds that are head tucking at 40 or 30 degrees, those guys will get pulled in. So I've got, oh, I should have sent it to you. I've got a pair of birds where they're a video where they're cracking the ice and playing with it like hockey puck around their cage. So, and the little blue crowns that you showed, they're actually pretty cold tolerant. Those guys used to break the ice and take a bath. I'm like, y'all are crazy. So
Well,
they're,
yeah, I remember I saw some in, Australia, and everybody that I've talked to said that they are very resilient like that, that
yes.
there is that variation and it's fine.
And that's why, in my opinion, Scaly, that's this one, and the Blue Mountains are some of the best lorries for people to start with because
Mhm.
they are so hardy. I hate to say it, but they're more forgiving. Whereas if you had a Goldie's lorikeet, if you do it wrong, I mean, don't feed them, pure nectar and some fruit, they'll die. I call those rentals. You don't. Scalies and Blue Mountains are very hardy, so those are
Mhm.
actually very good ones to start with to learn.
I mean, and it is interesting too that different species, because, and I think that's there are birds that are you kind of that, okay, like you say, they're a little bit more forgiving. We don't ever want them to be in poor conditions or not get the
No.
optimum welfare, but there are some that definitely are easier to deal with than others.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That is a Blackwing lorry, and I think I've got the only pair left in the United States,
Oh my gosh.
unfortunately. And I had pairs of them a long time ago, actually from quarantine, and I tried. I'm not. I don't like to incubate and hand feed. I call it a necessary evil. I had the
Mhm.
pairs of black wings, and they would kill every single chick that would hatch. They would trash the eggs. I mean, I'm talking about dozens and dozens and dozens of attempts to try to see if they'd be good parrots. And they're actually one of the reasons I went ahead and got an incubator, the Grumbach,
Hmm.
and started incubating hand feeding. So
Interesting.
because these guys are so high strung that they get excited, and next thing you know, the chick is a rug. So
Hmm.
I go ahead and I just incubate almost everything.
Yeah. So, all right. So lorries are different physically than other parrots. So tell me what the physical differences are.
Um, well, let me address one thing: the lorry versus
Sure.
lorikeet.
Oh, yes.
Lorries are with a rounded tail, more like an Amazon, and
Hmm.
lorikeets are like a cockatiel tail, where each feather tapers down to the next feather for a long, skinny tail. So even like the little blue crown lory that is approximately the size of a budgie, a small parakeet, that's actually a lory because its tail is more round. And then you have the Stellas have a really long tail. So it's the long cockatiel tail is a lorikeet, and the
Hmm.
Amazon tail is a lorry. That's a lorry because it's a rounded tail at the bottom.
Yeah.
Now, the difference between lorries and what I call seed eaters, not that you have to feed them seed because there's pellets and chop and all that other good stuff, but I just for simpleton, I call them seed eaters. The difference between them is lorries have a brush tongue. I should have sent you a photo of that. I'm sorry. And it
Oh,
actually has little brushes on the end. When it's relaxed, it's actually flat, and the tongue could look flat. But when it's extended, it actually brushes the flower in the wild and pulls the pollen off the flower. So you really do have to have pollen in their food. And a lot of the foods do not put pollen in their food because there are some regulations about pollen. So some of the bigger companies just feel it's easier to just no pollen. And if your lorry nectar doesn't have any pollen, I would suggest you get bee pollen, human grade bee pollen. And like for maybe like 1 cup of nectar, maybe put like half a teaspoon. It doesn't have to be much, half a teaspoon of bee pollen. Now, when the nutritionalist came out to my house, Liz Kukos, she stayed here. She came out a couple times and stayed here for several days, and we would do passage rates on the lorry. So from when they consume the nectar to actually when it comes out is actually only 15 minutes. So they have to extrapolate all their nutrients within 15 minutes of it going through their body. So it has to be definitely readily available nutrients. So the lorry's gizzard is very weak and it's not able. That's the reason they're not supposed to be fed seed. If they eat a seed, they're not going to die from eating a seed. But they can't have a diet of seed because their gizzard is so weak. They cannot grind the seed up and extract the nutrients. Like I could go out on my lawn, I could eat the grass, but I'm not going to get any nutrients from it because I don't have anything proper to pull it out, the nutrients. So that's why they're fruit, pollen, and nectar eaters, and that's what you need to gear them for, because that's the only way they're going to get nutrients. Oh boy, I just lost train of thought here. So they don't, okay, so they have the lighter, the weaker gizzard, which is why they can't eat seed. They do not have a ceca, which that organ is used in birds to digest fiber. So when people are trying to feed them all carrots and I don't know, all sorts of vegetables for lorries, it's a waste because I mean, it's they don't have a ceca to extrapolate fiber. So they need fruit, pollen, and nectar, and you've got to be worried about their liver. So you don't want to feed them any foods that are high in iron, and also like citrus, anything with the vitamin C, because what vitamin C does to a bird's body, or at least the lorries, is it binds iron in their body. So that's another reason you need to feed a wet nectar. And if you feed, I hate pellets because the bird has to crunch the pellet up, run over there, dip its beak in the water. Powder, I'm not a fan of, but as long as you feed nectar, at least multiple times a week, you could probably get away with the powder. But the powder diet was actually a gimmick that was developed way back because people didn't like the loose stool that the lorry excretes. But they need to be well hydrated because they need to flush their liver out, flush their system. So these people are feeding powder trying to make the stool, they're dehydrating their bird is what they're doing. And think about it. Why? They want to be able to have powder out for several days with a bowl of water? No. The clock starts ticking the minute they take some food and they dip into the water bowl. You've got bacterial contamination starting. The clock has started ticking. So what's the difference of them grabbing some powder, taking the water, and then that's how they make their meal? Or feed them a nice bowl of wet, warm nectar, and lorries like to gorge in the morning, and then throughout the day they'll forage. So they'll eat a little bit of this, eat a little bit of that. The powder, just pure powder diet, I am just not a fan of because it shortens the bird's life. It makes it where their liver can't get flushed. It gets toxic. They can get fatty liver and they can get iron storage, and it's a death sentence. I mean, they will die generally. I mean, you can have one bird. Well, I've been feeding my bird like that for 25 years. All right, great. You're the exception to the rule. Everybody else, it's not good. So at least multiple times a week, please. If you're gonna, and we're not, nobody's getting fooled. The minute you stick your beak in the water, you got bacterial growth going on. You should be changing the water once a day at least. So why not the nectar? Feed them nectar.
Um, Karen Anderson, who has Avian Suites in Minnesota, says this is terrific information for her lorry clients because I don't think a lot of people. I think there is, and Ashley had said earlier, it's amazing how such a beautiful bird produces such disgusting poo, and it's true. And I think that's a challenge, and that's something that people you need to consider before you delve into having a lorry or a lorikeet.
Yeah. One thing I try to suggest, because when they shoot out the cage, that's really a detraction. I suggest to people that they put the perch in diagonally, so the
Mhm.
bird tends to defecate into the cage at least. But yeah, it's not spectacular, and a lot of people are turned off about it. Like there was one breeder up in Connecticut. They went in and took all of his birds, and then there were some of the lorries because they thought the food was disgusting. All right, they confiscated all these lorries plus some rare seed eaters, brought them back to their Long Island rescue, whatever they got. Those are the people that got those birds, and because they didn't like the food because they thought it was disgusting, they put them on pellets because that was so much easier for them. But the parrots, lorries do not recognize pellets when you just drop them in on a pellet. They don't recognize that as food. I mean, unless they've been taught to do it. So those people lost a lot of birds because they didn't want to deal with the disgusting. So, I mean, to me,
Yeah.
that was a crime. So
Well,
it's
Paul Paul from In a Pickle, in Ohio says, he does think their droppings are easier to clean than out of other citizens in his experience. So one vote for
I
the
yeah, I
ease of
think so.
cleansing.
I'd rather wipe up a wet lorry stool than an Amazon clump. I mean, talk
Right?
about smear.
It all depends on what your style of poop cleaning is, I guess. But um,
Bounty.
so it's interesting when you're talking about, and I'm going to go a little off script, Chris, but when we're
Okay.
talking about uh, the powder and the your when you've got pathogens happening, so you said they gorge in the morning, so you give them the nectar, and so the fruit, how do you handle something like that for people who are keeping lorries and lorikeets? How do they manage the foodborne pathogens?
What I suggest, first of all, you got to make sure your water is good because there's a lot of places where the water is not good. There could be cryptosporidium, giardia. I mean, there's a lot of things. So you got to make sure your water is clean to begin with, that you're mixing the nectar up with, or even if you're feeding a powder and they're dipping into. What I suggest people do on top of make sure your water is good in the morning, I would put a bowl of how much they'll eat pretty much throughout the day. So they'll
Mhm,
gorge, and then for the next 6, 7, 8 hours, I mean, I know on the nectar thing that says several hours and then pull it. But to be straight up with you, I feed them enough that they can gorge and they eat throughout the day. And then what I suggest to pet people is pull that bowl and then put in another bowl of nectar only for like maybe 20 cc's. So just enough for them to have another gorge just before going to bed. And then the bowl's
mhm,
empty. And then you don't have nectar sitting in all night long. So to me, that's the more optimum kind of way to do it. So in the morning, and each pair eats approximately a cup of, one measuring cup of nectar. The larger birds will eat a cup and a half. The smaller birds will be like maybe 3/4. That's per two birds. So I would put that in there, let them gorge, let them eat throughout the day. Because one thing, I had a pet store one time, they were like, oh, I don't understand what's going on with these babies. And what they were doing is they were being so diligent about changing the nectar out, and it wasn't holding in suspension. Like I said, there were some of those diets out there were really going downhill. So it would dissolve and the solids would go to the bottom, and it would just be like those sugary water that would stay on the top. Because Liz told me that the fats and the sugars, was it the fats and the sugars float and then the proteins sink. So what was happening is they were being very diligent about changing their nectar out throughout the day, and the birds were gorging on just sugar water because they weren't being allowed get down to where the sediment was.
mhm.
Fruits, you can put them in there. Apples. I don't find that lorries really like bananas very much. I mean, somebody's probably out there says, "Oh, mine eats bananas." Well, okay, I got 350 or something of them, and they don't like bananas very much. They don't like strawberries very much, but they do like apples. The apple, that would be a mainstay. Um,
Mhm.
some of them like papaya, pomegranates, so so. Blueberries are very good for them. I do blueberries. Actually, I do a pound package of blueberries pureed up into my nectar every day. Applesauce, I used to use that, but I kind of I switched over to blueberries at this point. Pears, anything that's like fleshy. Oranges,
Mhm.
I would do probably not more than one time a week because that's a high in vitamin C. Your grapes are a little bit high in vitamin C, so I would do that with a little in moderation. I mean, I would not do it too much. But apples, blueberries, pears, which are not really big on pears. The papaya is so. So I fleshy, good fleshy. You need to
Okay.
hydrate a Lori. If you don't want to keep their body flushed, and then pick a kike. So because they're characters, but those are more, as I said before, a forgiving bird, but they're
Yeah.
not nectar bird. But
The,
uh,
can you so with the fruit, can you do like, could you do the fruit, on a skewer if you were a pet own like, if you didn't have as many?
oh yeah, oh
Um
no, they would love that, especially if you hung it from the top of the cage. And oh, lorries love if you got like those plastic chains, or like you're talking about the skewer where you can put your fruits on there. Oh yeah, they would
Mhm.
love that. Oh yeah, that's a very,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, they
I mean, they
definitely love
say
swinging.
and, with the fast, digestive system, that the
Yes.
metabolism is so high, and they're I mean, they are burning off a lot of the sugar that they're getting from the fruits and things. Are they so super active is how I would describe them. I mean, do you
Yes.
see and so you've gotta kinda keep them stimulated, I would think.
Yes. Yeah, they lorries are clowns. They love playing. I put big balls in my the softballs, the wiffle.
Mhm. Wiffle
I put
balls,
those in
yep.
my yeah. I put those in my cages, and then I've got some of the chains. So I've got they love the toys like that. What you got to be careful about is wood is okay, but something really porous, a fiber type, is
Mhm.
probably not good to have a long term because they lick everything. And they also
Right.
play basketball in their nectar. So that's why I use the bigger balls because I can't fit that into their nectar bowl.
There you go.
So yeah.
Ashley said she had a baby that was convinced the nectar was a bath. Um,
I Fortunately I don't get those very often. I don't understand why they do that. If your bird does like to take a bath in the nectar, I mean, obviously, I mean, all my birds have water bowls. I don't do the guinea pig bottle or the rabbit bottle. I do
mhm,
not do that because I think that's a very big disservice to a lorry because you really can't clean up in there, and they're relying on that as their moisture. Um,
mhm,
but if you have one that insists, what I would suggest to do is not only have a water bowl as an alternate preferable bath, you can put the cup up high. So they have to kind of like get up in there, and then all they can do is eat. They can't get their body up there and start, flapping.
nice,
That's the way
okay.
I've deterred ones
Yeah,
that
no,
do
I
that.
and so which kind of another question that comes up, bathing. So, they're drinking a lot of water, they're consuming a lot of moisture. How about bathing? What's the
They I
standard with that?
absolutely I can't imagine having a lorry and not letting them bathe. Even if you just give them a bowl of water to do it, because they do have nectar, or even if you do powder, they got sugar on their body, so they really need to
Mhm,
be able to get that washed off. So
okay,
it's just it's healthier for them to be able to at least take a bath.
mhm.
So it's
Would you
hopefully.
what about a mist system, like a misting system?
Are you talking about like in an aviary, or are you talking about like a spray bottle?
Either. I mean, I was talking about in an aviary, but you could do a spray bottle too, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the spray bottle would be is if you didn't want to have them, dumpster diving into a bowl of water and getting it everywhere,
Right.
because that's what they'll do. But so at minimum, if you're not going to provide them that, I mean, a spray bottle, and they probably won't even really like it, but at least you can get their feathers sort of wet and clean and let them groom themselves. The misting system, um, I tried that once, and I tried to use the nursery one with the very small tips, and that was just
Mhm.
it rains here a lot, so
Right, right.
but there is like out in California where it is so dry. The misting system actually saves their birds' lives a lot of the time because sometimes, I mean, we just don't have. I think like last summer was like the last 2 summers actually were some of the hottest summers ever, and we
Mhm.
just really don't get into the feels like 101, 107, 105, except for the past couple of years. But California, I mean, that's kind of like, I mean, it just blows me away when people tell me like it's 115, it's 120. So I can't even, if my temperatures were going consistently like that, yeah, I would have a misting system. Whether it was one of the gardening hoses that you could just turn on and
Mhm.
it, turn it upside down and let it spray, but you got to keep that above where they can't chew it. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the lorries definitely love to be able to take a bath or a rain shower, and it's good for them.
So, Nick just put up your website, the lorrywebsite.com.
Yeah, that's been a work in
No?
progress for 15 something years. No, no, it's good. I mean, it's good. I just um I only recently was able to contact the host, the web host, web.com, and get how I could get in there and change things because it has
Okay,
been forever. But yeah, there's good functioning information in that website.
there we go.
Uh,
And
do
people
not,
can suggest. Hmm?
excuse me.
I said,
Oh,
and people
I
can
have
suggest.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say people can rewatch this video too. It'll be available for people if they, know people that are thinking about it or have lorries and lorikeets. So, uh,
Yeah, I've got a lot of
yeah,
information on that site about feeding, poisonous, non-poisonous. I mean, just it's got a lot of information. It's a little embarrassing because I haven't sat down and kept up on it. Back when I started that website, because people used to contact me, they're like, "Do you have a Lori website?" And I'm like, "Well, that's actually a good name." And it was a domain name that I bought, Lori website, because they asked.
there you go.
Anyway, back when I started that website, it literally took a minute to almost 2 minutes per photo that's on that website to upload per photo. So it was, so yeah, I kind of lost steam on it after a while.
Mhm. I
So, but I'll
completely
try to do
understand.
better.
So,
Jordan got me to to snap up and start, maybe addressing this. So when these
that's
hot months roll along and I'd rather sit in the AC on my downtime, that's probably something I'll address.
yeah. You just say, "Oh, I'm working on the website. I gotta be inside." Sorry.
Well, it has the working thing in progress for
Uh,
over a decade.
so here a question for you. Lories
Yes.
and lorikeets, aviary birds or companions?
It depends on the person because for
Mhm,
me, I I don't have a pet because I've never desired them as pets, although they do make great pets. I've
mhm,
just been so fascinated about them. I love how they look. I love their lines. I love how they interact with each other. I love when they're playing and they're kicking each other, wrestling around like little puppies. I love watching them. Even I'm like 35 years into this. I've had lorries and I still go out in the yard and I'm like, well, sometimes I'm like, ugh. But most of the time I'm like, oh, I can't believe I'm able to work with these guys. It's just they're still so precious to me because this is my life. I mean, I
Yeah,
eat and breathe and sleep lorries. I mean, they're my life. I love looking at them. But so for me, yes, they're an aviary bird, and I don't talk to them. I do their noises. I'll twiddle my fingers. I mean, I just they have their buddies, but somebody that wants a pet, a lot of them make good pets. Some make great pets. I mean, if you want a great pet, pretty much so Blue Mountains and Scalies are. I think on my website I actually have like a 7 out of 10 birds will make a good pet, or
mhm.
like chattering lories, 8 out of 10 will not make a good pet, because like the yellow bibs, the chatterings, the black caps are excellent talkers. That's black caps. That's actually a juvenile pair. Their blue will come all the way up their neck. That's Loris Lori. Um, so they're great at talking. So it really depends on whether the person wants a buddy that'll be a pet. So that'll be inside, and you'll be paying attention to it directly, or an aviary bird, which is my case because I love just watching them. I mean, that's
Mhm.
the reason I got them. I didn't get them to breed. I got
Right.
them because they just fascinated me, and I just got good at it. So they like me,
Yeah.
I guess.
And I think that's important for people to know too, that there are some that will make good pets, and you can't. I mean, I don't think any species of parrot, I don't, or dog or cat, whatever. I don't think you can. Nobody can guarantee that's going to be a great pet.
Nope,
You know,
nope.
everybody there's been talk about breeding for pet quality and this and that, but honestly, it's like saying this guy's going to be a great husband or this woman's going to be a great wife.
Yep.
You can't do that.
No.
And I think aviaries are a very viable option for people who want to keep birds and have them be birds.
Yes.
And it's not because I think sometimes it's frowned upon. People go, "Oh, they're just out there in the." They're kind of living their best life. Some of them, if they're getting enriched, they're getting good food. Yeah.
Yeah. Carrie Ellen at Bird Gardens of Naples,
Hmm.
she is excellent. And what she does is when she gets birds in, and I don't mean necessarily lorries, but she triages. She
Hmm.
has, if she feels that they're going to be making a pet and that they'd be happier as a pet, she places them into a pet home. If she feels that they're aggressive, they're hormonal, they want to breed, she places them with a breeder. And then all the other ones that I call limbo birds, where they're not a pet and they're not a breeder, limbo birds, she keeps them for the rest of their
Yeah.
lives. So I do the same thing with the lorries. Like when I was just starting this, I would buy the quarantine birds and set up pairs. And then sometimes, a pet bird was like just really biting somebody and they just couldn't deal with it. And a lot of the times what I'll do is I'll bring that bird in and try to pair it up. And if it works out, that's great. I've got a good pair. If it still wants to be a pet, I try to figure out where I can place it as a pet again.
Hmm.
But they definitely, with birds, I mean, you definitely have to make them happy, because the minute you don't make them happy, between having the right food for them, the right toys for them, the right housing for them, the right companion for them, they they do not do well. They will not breed for you for sure if they're not happy, because it's not like dogs and cat breeding where it comes into heat and it happens whether they want it or not.
Hmm.
Birds absolutely have to be stimulated and be happy in order to breed. Otherwise, it
Yeah.
just
No,
it falls apart.
absolutely. So we've talked about diet, that, what's different about their diet. What about housing, Chris? I mean, when you do, perching and things like that in cages, what kind of different housing things do you need to consider when you're housing lorries
Okay.
and lorikeets?
You want me to do like aviary and then a pet situation,
However,
or
yeah, yeah,
okay?
why don't we.
Oh, are you there? Okay.
Yep, we're still here.
Can you hear me? Okay. For the lorries, all of mine, I'm trying to get in as big cages as possible. I'm doing like a 3 by 3 by 6 at this point for a majority
Mhm,
of them, and that's for a flight. And then you have perches. I like to do a perch along the bottom because a lot of the times lorries are arboreal. They would rather climb around versus flying.
mhm,
Actually, when you do see them flying, it's a little. It's not graceful. They definitely they're almost like the kites again. They like to climb mostly. I mean they do fly. So I'm not saying they
mhm,
don't, but so I run a perch long ways down the bottom, then across the front and the back, and then you got the nest box. Sometimes I'll have a perch coming out from the nest box. You need to do various sizes. You can't have just one size. You want nice thick perch. You want a skinny perch, because their feet, just like all the other parrots, have to be all different sizes.
mhm,
In the house, um, definitely do your different sizes. If you got the manzanita that you can, screw on the side, they like those to be able to all different
mhm,
size perch and different textures and which, they're all sticking off in different ways. The chains, like I said, the plastic chains, they love those. So, and like I said earlier, to keep them from pooping outside of the cage, I inside I would run my perches diagonally. So you got like a square cage, and I just go diagonally, and they tend to poop into the middle versus
Mhm.
hanging out the side of the cage. And I don't get shot very
Well,
often with them.
and that's a good thing. So you
Yeah.
and I talked a while ago about enrichment and how so
Mhm.
wood is okay, but probably not, because of the
No,
porous nature of
wood is fine. I mean, I'm
it. Mhm.
definitely up with wood. Um, I hate to say it, leather. That's a little
There you
porous.
go. Yep.
That's
No, and
more or
that's
less what. And even if it's the fiber, because I think you and I had talked about those fibery kind of things. As long as
mhm,
they don't twist it around anything, because they will work at stuff. They're not voracious chewers. 99% of them are not voracious chewers. So they could work, and that would be a temporary thing because they would destroy it. But like those
mhm,
happy huts with the strings are bad. Those rope perches that are like a little bendy, very bad, because there's actually what's bending is, I think there's like a lead threading that's in there, if I remember
uh-huh,
correctly. And then there's the string. I have had people contact me. They're like their bird hung itself because it pulled the fibers, the strings away, and then it got all caught up. So I wouldn't go for any like rope perches. Actually, they make that. I don't know what that plastic chain. I've ordered it from, I think, Jeffers. Like calf chain.
yeah,
But you know what I'm talking about. I mean, you do all that
right,
stuff.
the heavier plastic chain, and I think, there's
Yes.
things people can do with that, um, things that people so who are these guys?
That's a yellow scaly on the right and a blue mountain on the left. Those are young chicks,
Um,
if I remember correctly. I think the beak, if you, I think that I don't have my glasses on. The beak looks black, dark.
mhm,
Lorries, when they're first hatched, all the way up to about 6 months old, will have a dark beak, and then it turns into the orange. So I can tell a lorry's age from 6 months down, like damn near by the week, how old they are by the beak, because the beaks change and then the eyes change also a little bit. Um,
hmm.
I don't know why I went off on that tangent. Sorry. That was
Well,
just a
no.
tidbit
So
again.
as far as the enrichment is concerned, so it's not about, I mean, because they play a lot, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
very playful.
Yeah. They like
So
balls. With bells, just make sure it's the bells with the solid clapper, that it can't
mhm,
be, because I had one that got a toenail stuck in the little ring that attached it.
yeah,
So I mean, they're they're definitely, they'll be trying to tear the toy down. So, but
yeah,
they love it. They love toys. I mean, I've had them where they lay on their backs and they just sling the little toy around. So
mhm.
definitely chains, the skewer you were talking about, um, balls. I mean, I take Gatorade lids and put them in there, and they
Yeah,
hockey puck them.
and so do they like things so I'm all about, like, trying to address all the senses, it's not just about because with the other parrots, it's, destroying the wood and that kinda stuff, but I feel like
Yeah.
we get stuck. So, what about, like, like, sounds and things
That would
like
be your
that?
bells. Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
If they're not, sometimes when I put something in and they they don't recognize it, they act like I just threw a snake in there. Yeah, the plastic chain didn't work out on some juveniles one time. I thought they were just
Mhm,
gonna break their necks. So you kind of like got to get them used to it. But a lot of them, I mean, they like, definitely, if you have a ball with bell in it, or just even the bell, they like
mhm.
to, they like the noises. They like to be able to, hey, look what I'm doing, bang, 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 bang.
Right.
So they,
Maybe,
yeah,
Chris and I had talked before, and maybe we kind of collaborate a little bit on leather elves can maybe come up with some Lori toys because I don't think there's a lot available for people. It's kind of
yeah.
like I feel like people who are keeping Loris, then they need to be more creative. because
Yes.
it's not that
They're a
just go
smart
get a
bird.
wood toy. Yeah,
Yeah, no, they're
yeah,
a smart bird, and I like your idea with the skewer for the fruit, but, maybe a bell on the bottom or something, or a
yeah,
couple of
yeah,
plastic, rings, hanging from it. As long as they can't break the toy and hurt themselves, you'll be
mhm,
fine. So, but
yeah,
they are it's I love watching them when they do, grab a hold of that any of the hanging toys, because they will
mhm.
actually flap and, like, just get it going.
There
So,
you go.
that's,
Um, so would they forage in like, if you had a wicker ball and you put things in it, would they go for something like that?
what I would suggest is something too big to get into their nectar bowl,
Yeah, okay.
because what they'll do is they'll take it, and, like, sometimes I actually take toys away from them if they put it in their nectar bowl, if it's too small. Like, I
Mhm,
used to use the golf wiffle balls, and they would put them in the nectar. And that's great for the first time. But if you don't get that all disinfected inside, that sucker's growing some cultures in there. So, yeah, definitely if you do that, or actually if you could hang one where they really couldn't drag it around and dunk it somewhere, that would be really neat to have a wicker ball with
mhm,
stuff inside of it. Maybe you can shove stuff
yeah.
in it. And
So wicker would be
that's,
okay?
yeah. Yeah, I
Like the
mean,
wick okay,
I don't see where there would be a problem, because if I remember with wicker, it breaks off. When it breaks off, it's really small
right.
fires. So
So
so you should be
Nick
fine with
just
that.
Nick just posted that his husband them apple eating piranhas.
Oh, yeah. They definitely apples are great for them.
Yeah. And then Ashley says that she uses human baby toys make great Lori toys in her experience.
I've done some of that, like with the rattles, the little baby rattle. So,
Yeah,
probably for the smaller and the medium-sized one, the larger ones, they get a little destructo. The only thing I
yeah.
could say is, some of the soft, for baby chew toys, but
Mhm,
the
yeah,
rattles, yeah. Yeah,
very
that
cool.
would they would
Um,
definitely like that.
so if somebody's considering, they wanna jump into the deep end and they want a Lori or a lorikeet, what kind of
Yeah.
questions should they be asking the seller or breeder, Chris? What are the
Um,
red flags? What should they be asking?
my red flag is when I took my phone number off the internet years ago, because I would get so many people. I went to the lorry place today, the zoo. I want a lorry, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's not good.
Yeah,
Usually I ask them, have you had a lorry before? And if they say yes, then I usually start to work with them. If they say no, then I'm like, have you looked up, what their diet is, what they're required? Because they're not like the seed eaters where you can maybe, put seed or pellet on them and, like, go away for a couple of days.
mm,
You shouldn't ever do that, but
yeah,
I'm just telling you real life. If,
yeah,
if you can't be feeding them every single day, then you probably should just skip getting a lorry, because they
okay,
really, you with lorries, you get out what you put in. So if you feed them right, you keep them happy, you'll have a great, nice, healthy lorry generally, as long as you start out with one that's, healthy. Um, but if you neglect them, they'll they'll check out on you. So
yeah,
they're definitely, you got to be vigilant. Cages, um, because they do like climbing versus, they're not like a Rosella where they have to have like a just a constant flying thing going on. I mean, I suggest at minimum, 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot at minimum for a lorry.
mhm,
Anything, bigger is okay. 3 foot, 3 foot. I mean, for inside, that's good. Um, Actually, they like nest boxes. Even when they're not breeding, they're still
mhm,
they more secure. So if you give them a little wooden box, or even, like, I think they call it like a day box or something, where it's just, got an
mhm,
open front where they can get in. Lorries do like to go in boxes. The toys, definitely, you got to keep them busy. I mean, because otherwise they'll just get sad.
yeah,
And me personally, because like I said earlier, I'm a Noah's Ark kind of person. Everybody's got to have a buddy. So me personally, I like it when lorries have other lorries that they can hang out with. They're
Yeah.
really not that good interacting with other parrots. They can definitely get territorial, and lorries. I had a 6 month old red lorry that went lethal in my little group of babies that I held back, and
Mhm.
there was no aggression that I could see. And one day he just ripped the Rosenberg's face off. I came out and the Rosenberg was dead, which is horrible. But I knew it was him because he had blood on his beak. So you also got to watch with lorries two at a time, because if you house two at a time, if you have more than two lorries in one cage, you're probably going to have somebody voted off the island. Because what'll happen, I had one zoo. They were like, we want Duskies, and I'm like, no, that's not a good bird to have because they get very aggressive once they get mature. And
Mhm.
this person assured me, oh, they'd done it before, blah blah blah, it was fine. So they got two Duskies, and what happened is 3 years later, like I said, when they got mature, not that the Duskies paired up, the Dusky paired up with a red collared, and that duo, that pair, systematically was going in their lorry, throughout their lorry encounter area, and were just killing lorries, other lorries. They were just killing them as a pair. So
Mhm.
I get people that say, "Can I flock breed lorries?" Or no. If you want to have a batch of lorries as pets, that's great. You can have them all like maybe visit and everything and monitored. But when you're
Mhm.
housing them, two lorries. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
whether it's a, I mean, it could be a chattering lorry and a little blue crown lorry. Actually, I had a Stella and a chattering that were raised up together, and they were funny. Um,
Mhm.
but those birds, especially once maturity kicks in, they will systematically they will vote
Yeah.
the third on up birds off the island. So
Yeah.
it's
I
not
have
good. So
seen, in working with zoos, I've seen that with the like the lorry encounters and
yep,
it happens, and it's not because of, lack of diligence on people to,
no,
make sure that they're doing what they're supposed the staff is doing what they're supposed to do. It is that they're not a big flock bird.
no,
Um,
no. They definitely prefer pairs. But what happens is you don't see any aggression, and then all of a sudden, boom! Like I had quail when I very first started. One of my Lori banks of cages was 6 cages in a row, and I actually went to the ground. And like I said, my whole life has been trial and error. So if anybody has any questions, I'll tell you what doesn't work, and I'll tell you what does work because I've done it. So I had these quail in each of the regular size quail in each of the lorry cages, and
mhm,
for to pick drop food or whatever, the cleanup crew. So each pair had one quail in their cage. Everything was fine. 6 months. One day I came home from work. Every single quail had been slaughtered down to the last bird, checking, slaughtering the last quail. So what I'm saying is, it'll look like everything's fine until it's absolutely
mhm.
not. I mean,
Yeah,
they can snap. So just
yeah,
if you have three birds together and you think, oh, well, they've been doing fine, well, it's going to take hormone, it's going to take something. And so definitely pairs. But they can hang out as long as they don't fight. If you want to like let them, around the tops of the cages, playing with the toys, the
right,
perches, supervised, or at
right.
least listen to hear for squabbling.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, they,
Um Yeah, so we're at an hour, Chris, and I
oh,
wanna thank you. I learned
oh,
a lot, and I find them stunning to look at, fascinating. I mean, the tongue, all of it just amazes me. And I know people who have worked with them in zoos, and I know people that, with kind of as aviary birds, and then I know people that have them as pets, and it works, on both sides of that, and people are successful in both ways. So, it's kind of a personal choice thing. But I want to thank you. So people can check out your stuff, and you're going to work on that website. And now we publicly called you out on that.
yeah, second time in a month now.
Um, and but we can, and we've got Nick put a link in for Jordan's the Lori food, so we've got that out
Okay.
there. And if people have questions, they can email us or they can get in touch with you. But thank you
Yeah,
very
if
much.
they I was gonna say, if you have a question about a lorry, I mean, don't be timid. Ask me. I mean, definitely text me, and when I can, I'll answer it and do my best. So,
Just not while you're carrying the 9 gallons of nectar. That's all.
yeah, I start out the bucket itself is 6, and then I mix water in outside with it. So, but yeah, it's heavy, and I gotta walk real slow. It's like a ballet, not a fast ballet.
We need to get a video of that, please. We'd like to show that later on.
Uh, I'm
But
usually wearing a
thank
yard
you
gown.
again. Thank you again, everybody. There's been a lot of questions on the comments and questions, and I appreciate everybody kind of chiming in. And I think people learned a lot tonight. So
I
you
hope.
take care and
Well, thank you.
keep keep
And
doing
when
what
you
you're
come to
doing because
Florida
we need.
again,
I know soon. I'm working on it. That when
you
you
were so
mentioned Carrie Ellen,
close. Yes,
yeah, that's it.
because you went to
The
the.
other end of the world.
No, I meant when
Carrie
you
Ellen
came
and I
down
are
here.
working on it.
Good, good. She's an excellent one to
So
work with.
she is. She's one of my favorites. And what you said about how, at Bird Gardens in Naples, Carrie Ellen, she assesses and triages the birds and
She's
then
top
they go to the
notch.
right place. It's perfect. So
Yes,
very cool.
yes.
But the I just wanted to remind my listeners that if you have a particular person that you would like to have on, or you'd like to have me talk to, just shoot me an email, shoot me a message, and we'll see what we can do. No promises, but we'll see what we can do. And my guest next week, oh, I love Nick. He reminds me of these things. So we're having a kind of, it's not a contest. It's just if you guys message me pictures of your birds playing with Leather Elves toys, I will message you back with a 25% off code for your next order. I just love seeing these pictures. I've been putting some of them up on our social media, Instagram and on our Facebook page. So pictures or videos. I had Jen Perez ask me today if videos were okay, and yes, they are. In fact, sometimes they're even more fun. But it's neat to see how birds actually interact with the things that we make. So send us your pictures, private message them to me, and I will send you a code for 25% off. Next week, yeah, Lori says it makes your birds famous. It's true. And Laura, some of Lori's birds are very famous. But next week's guest is going to be Jay LeBeau of the Javiary. And Jay and I are going to be talking about passerines in aviculture. And the back and forth that we've had so far has been very interesting. So I look forward to talking with Jay and having you guys learn more about what he does with passerines. So everyone take care. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you all next week here on Friday Night Flock Talk. Take care, everybody.